This is a 24 by 36 inch linen canvas, and I'm using acrylics today. And I primed the canvas with some burnt sienna, as you can see here. Now here's the reference photograph I'm using, and I took that just a few hundred feet from our house, and that's the Saint Augustine Lighthouse there in the background. Now I didn't want to lose my drawing there of the lighthouse as I painted the sky, so before I started I used some liquid mask to mask out that area, and I'll peel that off later when I paint the lighthouse. The first stages of a painting like this always go very quickly, and my goal is just to block in the large areas, just to block in those large shapes. Okay, you caught me. I did block in some smaller shapes along the way, but I think you know what I mean. Getting the whole canvas covered is very important to begin with. The reference photograph here was taken just before sunset, and it was a bit of an overcast evening, so everything, all the colors were quite soft, and I did like just that light patch of sky, but it wasn't very dramatic. But I sort of like that subtle, soft look, and that's what I was after here in this painting. At this point, all that's left to do, which is most of it, is add details now that all those large shapes are put in. And adding the details is really the most fun part of the painting, but it really takes a long time. Adding those big, large areas at first goes very quickly, but unless those large areas are put down in the proper way and get the right values and so on, no amount of detail will help if those large areas aren't blocked in first. Putting in these fence posts looks very tedious, but it's not. It's very quick, and this is something I have to do quite often. And one little tip here to accomplish this is to load the brush up with quite a bit of paint and not have it very thick. Have the paint thin enough so it just flows off the brush easily. That way I can make lots of these fence posts without loading the brush up again. I do have to keep in mind that as these posts go back, they will get smaller and closer together. So I'm just kind of eyeballing that and using my reference photograph to check that every once in a while. Here's how I make those all perfectly vertical. I'll put my brush on one end of this yardstick. Back here, I'll use my thumb and forefinger and just slide that up and down the edge of my canvas. Put the brush on there and just pull that brush stroke down to create each post. And then I just repeat that process. Now I jump around on these paintings a whole lot because I don't want to totally finish one area of a painting and leave another area unfinished. So I like to create these paintings and finish them all to the same point, to the same degree at the same time. That's why I keep jumping around here. And that helps me to keep some harmony in the painting and keep the overall composition intact. Now, did I draw this out by hand? No, I used a projector. There's so much controversy about using a projector, pros and cons. To me, I don't worry about it at all. I do have the capacity to draw this, but it would take me a long time. I probably wouldn't get it as accurate as I wanted to. So projecting an image like this is a real time saver, and it's been done for years and years. Lots of artists do it, and lots of artists don't want to admit it. Of course, I lose a lot of my drawing underneath here as I paint, and I use a pastel pencil to sketch in my details that have been lost under this paint. And that's what I've been doing here. I'm using about the same method here to do these horizontal lines as I did the vertical lines. Just laying this ruler down, using my finger to run along the edge of the ruler with my brush slightly off that ruler's edge, and just dragging that line straight across. Makes a nice straight line, and I really did this for years and years when I was a sign painter. That's how we used to make borders on signs. Quick and easy way to do that. It's a little hard to see here, but I'm using my middle finger to slide down that ruler and then I'm using my other two fingers to hold that brush. This goes very quickly. A little practice maybe, but it's a very good method for drawing these straight lines. Just remember to load the brush up, have the paint thin enough so it flows off the brush easily. That way I don't have to load the brush up very often. It's always nice to add some human interest to a painting, so my wife Sarah was on the pier with me as I took this picture, so I, of course, added Sarah in the painting. Remember at the beginning of this painting where I masked the lighthouse? Well, here I'm scraping that off, and that left me with this accurate drawing of the lighthouse underneath the sky. It's really helped because otherwise I would have had to paint that sky around the lighthouse or just redraw the lighthouse in here. So this was an efficient way to speed things along. I had to rub that quite a bit just to be sure I got all that mask off, because I wouldn't want to paint the lighthouse over the mask, because inevitably any mask left on there would have come off at some point and left that burnt sienna background. The lighthouse is white with a black stripe, but since this was later on in the day, of course that wouldn't be pure white, so it would be somewhat grayed, but mostly having some influence from the sky. So I'm basically using that sky color, that cool bluish color, making it lighter with the addition of some white, and that will create this white stripe on the lighthouse. Well, the lighthouse is cylindrical, so that white stripe wouldn't be flat. So I'm adding some lighter areas to the sides. I'll let that dry for a few moments, and I'll jump up here and add that area right under the lantern room. This is very dark. It really makes a beautiful contrast with the rest of it. When I paint something like this lighthouse, I try and make it as accurate as I can, because if something is a little bit off, people may not know exactly what's off, but they'll know something's wrong. It's almost like doing a portrait. If the eye is a little bit to the left or right or up or down, it just doesn't look right. So getting the accurate proportions and size of something like this lighthouse seems to be very important. Not so important with things like trees or really anything else in this landscape, but that lighthouse has to be just pretty much spot on. I'm adding the black stripes now, and I'm also adding that warm yellowish color to the right side of the lighthouse on the white stripes. And that's because there's an influence from those yellowish clouds to the far right on the side of the lighthouse. Now it's a matter of stepping back, taking a look, and seeing what I think needs to be added. So working on the water down here, adding some reflections, and then putting the finishing touches on these posts on the railing. There's a lot of these, but like I said earlier, it goes quite quickly. Now I didn't want all these posts to be the same value, so after I put them on there, I changed some of those posts to be a little bit lighter, others a little bit darker, and of course I added those larger posts between the smaller posts. It's always hard to know when to stop painting. At some point, paintings can get worse rather than better, and that's what I generally use as a guide. When I don't know what else to do to a painting, then I stop. Now, there is a lot of detail in this painting, but I don't consider it overworked. So I guess at this point, I will put down my brush and consider this painting finished. Thanks for watching.